You know, when I was growing up, my mother or my grandmother every once in a while would say, "Oh, you are just like your dad." And sometimes it was intended as a compliment. Sometimes it was because my dad was sometimes pretty funny. He was a resourceful guy. Can be quite charming as well. And then again, sometimes those words were spoken in frustration because my dad was frustrating, and I inherited it. I always loved to hear that I was kind of like my dad. I always looked up to him. Even years later, when I was more grown up in my understanding of him, and I saw that I began to realize that he had some major flaws that I didn't want to emulate, I still liked the idea that I might possess his best qualities. I sometimes see this attitude in my children too. On one Father's Day, I think it was about 10 years ago, I was given this plaque. Some of you have seen this plaque before. It was humbling to receive this. It's still up on my bookshelf at work. Humbling, daunting, encouraging, fearful, all at once in one little plaque. I desperately wanted to live up to this compliment, knowing that I would miserably fail before I even got started. And I'm honored and challenged to have it on my bookshelf every day. Now that my kids are 19 and 15, smart, so much smarter, more beautiful, amazing than I ever was, or even Jody. And that's saying a lot. I still hope to be one of their heroes, and that they will have reason to imitate me, but just not all of me. Today is Father's Day, and dads, I want to talk to you today about the opportunity that has been placed before you to develop a lasting legacy as a father. Now, being a father is not easy. We all know that. I mean, there isn't a lot in our culture that encourages good fathers to be good fathers in the home. We don't see it on TV or movies because it doesn't make for good comedy or good conflict, right? It's way easier to see a dad who is the butt of the joke on the screens, right? It's way easier to see a deadbeat dad who a protagonist has to rise up and be better than. And so that's why we don't learn how to be fathers from watching shows. A father has to somehow learn how to balance and manage the competing tensions that are in every dad's life. He has to be a good leader without being a tyrant. He has to be firm without being inflexible. He has to be strong without being overbearing. He has to be loving without being a pushover. And it isn't easy to figure out the balance of all of those things. A father's job is to develop the character in the lives of his children, to love them. Dads, here's the catch. You will develop your kids' character whether you do it intentionally or not. Every single dad in here, when their kids are under the age of 5, get that plaque. That they see you as their hero. And then for the next 65 years, it's your job to keep yourself there. I want to talk today about a father and son relationship in the Bible. We're going to pause on our long chew into Matthew that we've been doing for this week anyways, and look at a passage from the Old Testament where we're going to look at the relationship between Isaac and his dad Abraham. Now, it's one of the oldest father-son relationships that we actually get to dig into a little bit. Abraham was a great man. He did many great things, and God used him in a great way, but Abraham was not perfect, not even close to it. And yet he was God's man. God chose him to do something really wonderful and cool. But today we're going to look at some of the events from Isaac's life that show us the influence that a father can have on our life. And dads, I want to encourage you to think about these things as you raise your kids. Now, the backstory is that Abraham was chosen by God when he was a young man. God called him to leave the home of his father and mother and travel to a new land, that he was going to do something very special through Abraham. And God gave Abraham a very bold promise. He said, I'm going to make you into a great nation. He said, I'm going to bless you and make you famous, and you'll be a blessing to others. He also said, I will be your God and the God of your descendants after you. Genesis 17. And when Abraham and his wife Sarah were very old, God finally gave them a son, Isaac. And God said to them, you will name him Isaac, and I will confirm my covenant with him and his descendants as an everlasting covenant. Now fast forward a few years. Abraham has passed away. Isaac, his son, he's now a grown man, and we're going to take up the story in Genesis 26. There are 3 events specifically in this chapter that I think will help fathers pass on a legacy of goodness to their kids. I've titled today's message, Lasting Legacy. Here are some of the things that you could do for your kids that would have a generational payoff. First of all, make sure that you give your kids something to continue. Make sure that you give your kids something to continue. In Genesis 26, there was a famine in the land, and Isaac was preparing to move. But then the Lord appeared to Isaac and said, do not go down to Egypt, but do as I tell you. Live here as a foreigner in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. I hereby confirm that I will give all these lands to you and your descendants, just as I solemnly promised Abraham your father. I'll cause your descendants to become as numerous as the stars of the sky, and I will give them all of these lands. And through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Now we know, having a perspective of time, that this is true because out of the lineage of Abraham came Jesus. And so he was starting something even way back then in order to get to a place where it is that generational blessing would have been passed down the eons in order to get to a place where Jesus could be born. Anyways, this is basically the exact same promise that he had actually given Abraham prior. He said, I'll do this because Abraham listened to me and obeyed all my requirements, commands, decrees, and instructions. See, God started something in Abraham's life that he was able to continue in Isaac's life due to the fact that Abraham was obedient to do what it is that God had asked him to do. And God wants to do things in your life that he wants to continue in your children's lives. And you just need to be obedient to what it is that he's asked of you so that you can see the payoffs of that. Now, I'm not talking about, the generational blessing that comes from passing on the family business or making sure that your children follow in your career path. I'm talking about a generational investment of sorts in the area of character, in the area of identity, obedience, in the area of faithfulness and of service. I have a friend whose father would tell him again and again, a Wells never quits. A Wells never quits. This is just something that he had said over and over and over again. And the great news is the dad had the credibility in order to continue to share that because his dad never quit. And his dad never quit. And as a result, his son believed it. And his persistence paved the way for his son's huge successes. It became a part of just who they were. Now, there's something about being able to say to your sons and daughters, this is who we are. This is the kind of choices that we make. This is the type of life that we lead. And then you walk it out. There's a story about Martin Luther King Jr. that I like. He entered a shoe store one day with his very young son. Martin Luther King Sr., they were told if they wanted to buy shoes, they'd have to go into the back section to buy shoes. Martin Luther King Sr. said, we either buy shoes right here in the front of the store or we don't buy them at all. I don't know if they left the store with the shoes that day, but what I do know is that there was something implanted in Martin Luther King Jr. he left with a strong sense of their identity. One time when I was a kid, I did something so very stupid to another neighborhood kid. And when my dad found out, he picked me up, marched me down to their house. On the way there, he said, "We Hacketts apologize and make things right when we are wrong." He brought me to their back door, and I had to humble myself, apologize, even though I was absolutely mortified. Why? Because we Hacketts apologize, and we make things right. We live out unconditional forgiveness and love. One family I know, and I'll use the name of Smith to not steal their blessing. When they go out to eat, one of their children scans the restaurant, and they pick a very specific table, and then they talk to their waitress and say, "We would like to make sure that we pay for that specific table anonymously. Please don't tell them that it's us who are paying." And every time they go out to eat, this is what it is that they do. They pick a table together, they say, "We'll pay for it," and they make sure that that bill is covered for someone else. What kind of identity do you think they're instilling in their kids by doing that? By the way, the identity that I pass on to my kids is we always eat where the Smiths are eating. It works out great. Fathers, make sure that you have something of value to pass on to your children. Make sure that your life begins something generational that you want to see continue throughout the generations living after you, so that God can continue something in them that will reap a harvest of blessing. Just like Abraham's heritage of faith and obedience. And then second, be aware and help your kids be aware of your character flaws. Be aware of and help your kids be aware of your character flaws. Something really interesting happens in Genesis 26. It says in verse 6, "So Isaac stayed in Gerar, and when the men who lived there asked Isaac about his wife Rebekah, he said, 'She's my sister.' He was afraid to say, 'She's my wife.' He thought, well, they will kill me to get her because she is so beautiful." Later, Abimelech, the king, found out that Isaac had been dishonest, and he was absolutely furious. And if this story sounds familiar, it's because Abraham pulled the exact same stunt with his wife a few chapters earlier, with the exact same king. Both Abraham and Isaac did what they did because of cowardice and a lack of character. Both men showed a willingness to put the risk of their wives before their own risk. They put their wives in a vulnerable situation and forced them to lie in order to keep themselves safe. And both men were wrong to do it. Abraham was a man of God, and God used him, but that doesn't mean that he was perfect. Isaac was a man of God, and God used him, but he wasn't perfect either. The same can be said for Moses and David and Peter and Paul. The only perfect person who walked on the earth was Jesus. Anyways, here's the unfortunate truth. Your children are likely going to pick up your bad habits. They're likely going to inherit some of your bad character flaws. If they see you do cowardly things, they'll probably resort to cowardice as well. If you put work above your family, they will too. If they see you respond to challenges by losing your temper, they'll probably rant and rave too. When things don't go their way, they're probably going to resort to the things that you do when things don't go their way, and you're going to hate that. If they see you be lazy when you should be helpful, it doesn't matter how many times you tell them, "Stop being lazy." They will follow in your footsteps. I'm preaching to myself this morning. It's great. Here's the problem. if you could fix your faults, you probably would. Nobody goes, I think I'm going to suck at life today. No. You probably have some things that are cyclical behaviors in your life that you wish you didn't have, but you struggle to change them. Yes? Anybody in here have some of those? Just a few of us. The rest of you? Wow. You know that if you could get rid of your worry and anxiety, you probably would. Right? If you could fix your faults, you probably would, but you can't because you're not perfect. So your kids will probably fail from time to time. Maybe they'll see you fail big from time to time. Here's what you can do. You can be completely honest with them about your faults. You can say, for example, I struggle with blank. I struggle with anger. And I hate it. It hurts me in my relationship with God. It hurts me in my relationship with your mother. It hurts me in my relationship with other people at work. It hurts me all over. It hurts me in my health. It hurts me in whatever, right? You can be honest with them, and you can say, it's a problem that I want to help you avoid. You can do better than me. In my case, I've had to have so many heart-to-hearts with my kids over the years. I pointed out the many different things in me that I don't like, and I've had to say to them, this is a battle that I lose far too often. Please do your best to stay away from it. Now, please understand that I am not saying that you should say to your kids, do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't work. We all know that. It needs to be, man, when I do this, I am so wrong. Please forgive me. I want to see you be better than me. That's what we're talking about. Talking about being transparent with your kids about your weaknesses and faults. Imagine if Abraham had said, hey, Isaac, I brought shame on the family, a name when I lied to Abimelech, and I treated your mother with disrespect, and I kind of took the cowardice way out. I was not a man of honor when I did this. I need you to be so much better than me, son. You can do differently. Don't follow my example on this one. See, your kids will pick up some of your bad habits and your bad qualities. I'm encouraging you to just be wise enough in order to recognize your own faults and then share with them what they are so that they might not repeat it. Admit them to your children so that you can help them be strong enough to overcome them. Here's a third thing that I want to encourage you to do. Make sure that your kids see you doing things right. Make sure that your kids see you doing things right, doing the right things, doing the good things. Toward the end of chapter 26, Isaac moved to another place. And the Bible says that God appeared to Isaac there and spoke words of comfort and promise over him. And then similar to what he said in the first part of the chapter, here's what I like. It said, then after he said these things to Isaac, this is what it is that Isaac did. Then Isaac built an altar there and worshiped the Lord. Why did Isaac decide to build an altar there? That's how it is that they connected with God during that time. And they wanted to make sure, because this really amazing thing happened, that they spent some time being thankful to God. Why did Isaac build an altar? Because he had seen and heard about his father doing it so many times in the past. Abraham built an altar there and dedicated it to the Lord, Genesis 12. Then he built another altar and dedicated it to the Lord, and he worshiped the Lord, Genesis 12:8. There he built another altar to the Lord, Genesis 13:8. And on and on and on. Abraham gave his son the example of spirituality to follow. Abraham's custom was to build an altar at every key moment and to stop and pause and worship the Lord there and thank him for what it is that he's done. Isaac knew this, and he heard the stories that were passed down. He watched his dad do this in the past, and so he did it in the same way. Men, you're in church today. That is a big deal in this world we live in. You are providing such an example for your kids. Do everything that you can to build on that example. You who are watching online today, I hope you're watching with your kids. Continue doing things that you know are good for them and be faithful in them. It's necessary for the kids to see examples of your spiritual life. That means engaging in church. That means that they see you when you pray. That means they see you when you worship. They see you as you serve. They follow Jesus and repent when they fall short. They're going to see your faults because you can't hide them. Will they also see your strengths? Make sure they have an example to follow. The best way to do this is to just take them with you. Everywhere you go. Read with them. Pray with them. Take them to church things together with you. When I'm invited to go speak in a church in another place, I don't leave my kids at home. I bring them with me. I take whoever's available. You want to come? Let's go together. I invite my kids into groups that we have in our house. Most of the time they don't want to be there, and so they leave. But they've been invited. Please stay. We'd love for you to stay. No, we're just going to eat dinner and then leave. Okay, that's all right. I invite my kids to battle and war when we are trying to cast demons out of people. Why? Because I want to watch my kids learn how it is that they should battle and war. I ask them to join me as I serve. What I'm saying is give your sons and daughters the opportunity to see your faith in action. Give them a hands-on example to follow. This is my conclusion. Dads, the truth is that your kids want to be like you. Let that sink in for a minute. I know that sometimes you might hear the opposite. Sometimes in anger, your kids may have said something like, I'll never be like you. That's because sometimes we go about things the wrong way. But you have to remember that your kids do want to be like you. In order for your kids to have character, you need to have character. Character is, so freaking hard to develop. But if you'll pay the price in your life to become the man that you want them to become, generational blessing is a principle that God can never go against. Invest. Pay the price that you need to pay to become the man that you need to be. So it will be easier for your sons and daughters to pick up your strengths and to sidestep your weaknesses. Make it your objective to give your kids something to continue. Be transparent with them about the things in your life that aren't the way that they should be. And then give them an example to follow. Dads, you should be taking a photo of that right freaking now. Write those things down. You're going to need them in the future. I know I do. Make sure they know the place that God has in your life. And the generational blessing that you will reap from that will be beyond your expectations.